Greetings, everybody. This is Winnie, Wriggle, and welcome back to Direwolf20's 1.16 mod pack. Today, we're going to build a Woot Mob Factory. And let me just give you a little bit of a heads up that even I found this project slightly confusing. So we're going to take this step by step through the crafting process for Woot. Let's take a look at our project box. First, and most importantly, there is documentation. It's called the Woot Guide. This contains all the information you'll need in order to set up a Woot factory. There are kind of two very important things you need to know. One is that factories are run using Cantatus Fluid, and the second is that factories are multi-blocks and come in 5 different tiers. Every tier has a set of required ingredients, including a heart, a primary base, a Cantatus cell, an ingredient importer, and a loot exporter. And then each tier adds additional extra blocks. We are going to build the tier 1 factory today, the Zelator. So we will also need to make 2 amaranth blocks, 2 factory connectors, and 1 perk slot. As you might imagine, as the factories go up in tiers, the required crafting also increases. So let's talk a little bit about crafting in the Woot mod. The Woot mod is one of those that I like to call a multi-layered crafting kind of mod. So we're going to start out with some of the basic tools you'll need for the basic crafting. The most basic crafting you'll need is to first make some Stygian iron. You make that by putting Stygian iron dust in any kind of furnace apparatus, and it is composed of iron, netherrack, and soul sand. A pretty easy recipe. You will also need to make a yaw hammer and an intern. The yaw hammer is used for crafting. The intern is the hammer that you use and actually to form the factory. Another beginning crafting tool you'll need to make is a Stygian Anvil. Note that you will have to put this on top of a magma block in order for it to craft anything. The anvil is a very simple recipe. It's just Stygian iron ingots, an anvil, and some obsidian. The next tier of crafting, if you will, involves the creation of dyes. You'll need to make these dyes on the Stygian Anvil and then use these dyes to craft the other things that are needed to make the other blocks in the mod. For example, in order to make die casings and die plates, you're gonna need to use the die casing dye. Think of this as a mold. In order to make things like plates, you'll need the plate die. Also important to know is you only have to make each of these dyes once. They're not consumed in crafting. So let's take a look at the die casing die. You literally will put a piece of obsidian on the anvil along with a piece of gunpowder, and you will get a die casing die. And we'll show you an example of this when we get over to our new Woot room. The next tier of crafting involves taking the casings you were able to make with the dyes and turning them into plates. And in order to do that, you have to infuse them with something called pure dye fluid. You get pure dye fluid by using the dye liquefier combined with red, yellow, blue, and white dyes. Once you have some pure dye fluid, you put it in an injection press along with your dye casings to get dye plates. Once you have dye plates, you can start crafting the other blocks in the mod. For example, in the first tier mob factory that we're going to build, we're going to need some amber blocks. Amber blocks require the use of a brown dye plate, along with some stone. The brown dye plate is made by putting a brown dye casing in an injection press, giving it power, and pure dye fluid in order to craft the brown dye plate. The dye liquefier, that is the thing that you use to get pure dye fluid, is created by using 6 dyes, a piston, a bucket, and a machine casing. The machine casing for Woot requires 4 Stygian iron plates and a chest. You get Stygian iron plates by using your yaw hammer with some Stygian iron and your plate die. So we'll be crafting quite a few of these in order to make some of the Woot components. Once we have gone through these basic crafting processes and have the die plates that we'll need to create some of the blocks, we'll also need to make Cantatus Fluid. The factory itself runs on Cantatus Fluid. You get Cantatus Fluid by processing items in fluid vats. For example, if we put redstone in a fluid vat with power and something called purge fluid, we will get Cantatus Fluid. In order to produce purge fluid, you need to use a fluid vat with power and water, along with either blaze rods, rotten flesh, ender pearls, or bones. We, of course, already have a mod farm, so we are full up on rotten flesh. So that's what we'll be using for phase 1. And then we'll be using redstone to give ourselves Cantatus Fluid. Then, of course, we're going to need a way to hook all of this together. And we are going to use XNet to manage the fluid and the eventual item exporting from the mob factory itself. Once you have the basic crafting items down, one of the most important things you can make is the layout guide. I am actually going to take the layout guide and then pick up this entire chest as is, using a cardboard box from Mechanism, and take this over to the place I've prepared for our Woot Factory setup. Yay, a brand new room in the base for another giant multi-block structure. Okay, I'm going to set down our supply chest. And let's take our layout guide and we're going to put it up here on this guide block in the sky that I've created, because this sucker in its highest tier is going to be really big. Once you set down the layout guide, you can see that it gives you what the tier 1 Woot Mob Factory is going to look like once we've made each of these blocks. If you right click on the guide, it goes up to the next tier to show you the layout. So that's tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5, and what it will eventually look like once we have all the materials that we'll need in order to craft this. Note that in order to craft the later tiers, you will need items that the lower tiers produce. But we're only going to build the tier 1 factory for today, and then we'll upgrade in future episodes. So let's start by showing you some of the very basic crafting mechanisms in Woot. We'll start with the Stygian Anvil. You'll need to put down a magma block and then set the anvil on top. And we're going to create the 3 dies that we'll need in order to do some of the crafting in this mod. Yes, I realize we've already created them once, but it can't hurt to watch this process again. It always wants you to put the base ingredient, that is the differing ingredient first, and then the obsidian. So we'll use the stone slab and a piece of obsidian, and then bonk it with our yaw hammer, and we get a plate die. Let's do the same thing again for the next one. Gunpowder, obsidian, bonk it with a yaw hammer, and we get our die casing die. Nether quartz, obsidian, bonk it with a hammer, and we get our shard die. Next up is the die liquefier and the injection press. And I'm going to go ahead and use XNet to manage both the power and the fluid that is running through some of these machines. So we're going to set these down kind of willy-nilly and I'll clean it up later. Let's start with our die liquefier. This is where we're going to put red, yellow, blue, and white dye in order to get some pure dye fluid. Then we'll take that pure dye fluid and put it in an injection press in order to craft all of the different dye plates from the dye casings. So I know for crafting some of the blocks we'll need for our multi-block structure, we're going to need magenta and pink dye. And in particular, we're going to need the pink dye plate and the magenta dye plate from the mod. So to make our magenta dye plate, first we need a magenta dye casing, and we do that by putting dye with our yaw hammer and dye casing in our inventory. And that gives us magenta dye casings. Let's do the same thing for the pink dye casing. So now we have pink and magenta dye casings, and we used the dye casing dye and our yaw hammer, neither of which gets consumed in the crafting. Now let's hook up a basic XNet system. There's the XNet controller that we're going to need in order to create the routes between items. And although you may have seen some of my XNet tutorials, we'll do a very quick one. For every block that we want to be in the XNet network, we need to put a connector on it. So we'll need one on the XNet controller, one on our power cell, one on our die liquefier, and one on our injection press. And then we'll connect those using network cable. So now they are all part of the network, and we should see them when we open the XNet controller. We also want to put items in the die liquefier. We'll just do that with a chest, which I will also put a connector on. Now you can see all 5 of the blocks that we've hooked up to the network. The first thing we're going to do is provide everything that needs power with powder. So when we edit channel 1, the default is XNet energy. We're going to create that, call it power. And then for everything that needs power, we'll include it in the network. So we're getting power from the dimensional cell. So this will be an extract, and then we will insert into all 3 of the other blocks, including the injection press, the die liquefier, and the controller itself. So now everything we've set down here should have power. Yay! Now we want to move items like the 4 die colors we're interested in out of the chest. In fact, I'm going to need one of each of these to set up the whitelist for XNet. So we want to move these out of this chest and into the die liquefier. So we go back into XNet, create a new channel called item, and say create, and we'll call this the die. And we'll take items, extract them out of the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. And insert into the die liquefier. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you'll see that it is now getting the red dye, and so it will gradually add each of these colors. Once it has a combination of all 4 colors inside of it, we will get the pure dye fluid. While that's working on making some pure dye fluid, let's go ahead and set up the rest of the XNet system. So we'll make a 3rd channel, this one called fluid, and say create, and we'll call this pure dye. And we want to take the pure dye out of the dye liquefier, so extract, and insert it into the injection press. So we have an injection press with power and pure dye fluid. We can take our magenta die casings, put them in here, and they turn into magenta die plates. And you'll see it's consuming the pure dye fluid. And we'll do the same thing with our pink die casings. And now we have more of the crafting ingredients we'll need to make some of the blocks in the multi-block structure. The next thing we want to set up is the crafting sequence we'll have to go through in order to make our Cantatus fluid. So we'll take a couple of fluid vats, a sink as a water supply, and then of course the items that we'll need in order to create the purge fluid and then the Cantatus fluid. An important note on some of the blocks from Woot: you can only insert and extract from certain sides. A perfect example of that are the fluid vats that we've set up for the next process. So here I've already laid these out. So we have our sink, which is providing water to our first fluid vat. And if we add rotten flesh to that, it starts producing purge fluid. That purge fluid is going into the next vat. And if we combine that with redstone, we get Cantatus fluid. XNet is handling all those transactions in different channels. So we have a channel just for the water where we extract the water from the sink and insert it into the fluid vat. And one more channel where we extract the purge fluid from the opposite side of that fluid vat and insert it into the next one so that it can create Cantatus fluid. And right now, this is just proof of concept. I'll clean this up off camera so that it's a little more compact and neat. But it's important to note that the fluid vats in particular will accept items from the left, top, and front, and you can extract from the right, back, and bottom. Okay, now we want to start crafting all of the blocks that we'll need in order to set this up. So let's take a look at our user manual for the list of those blocks. So under the basics section, under factory tiers, you can find the list of blocks that are in every tier, as well as those specific to the tier you're building. So we need to make a heart, a primary base, a Cantatus cell, an ingredient importer, and a loot exporter. All of them will require machine casing, so let's go ahead and make a bunch of the Stygian iron plates so that we can make a bunch of the machine casings. First, a bunch of Stygian iron plates. I think let's go ahead and make half a stack. And now we can make some machine casings. Let's go ahead and make all we can, which is 8. So now let's make our heart, which requires mob heads. I think we have plenty of zombie heads in the mob's farm. Next, we need a primary base. This is where the pink dye plate and magenta dye plate that we made will come in handy, along with some stone. Whoop. One primary base. Now we need a basic Cantatus cell, that is glass, iron bars, and a machine casing. Ta-da! We also need an ingredient importer, which is just a hopper and a machine casing. Ta-da! And a loot exporter. Also just a hopper, this time on the bottom of a machine casing. If we take a look at the Zelator tier page, we also need 2 amaranth blocks, 2 factory connectors, and 1 perk slot. For an amaranth block, we'll just need any kind of stone along with those magenta dye plates. So we'll make, and then I think the factory connectors are just any color block like the amaranth we just made along with some redstone. So now we have 2 factory connectors and 2 amaranth blocks. Last but not least, we need 1 perk slot, which is a purple dye plate. Purple dye and the dye plate. And then we run this over here to our injection press, and there we have a purple dye plate. And there we have a perk slot. We need 2 more blocks for the creation, and that is a mob controller, which we can make in the Stygian Anvil. But first we have to make a prism, which is made by putting a piece of glass in our injection press with the pure dye fluid. We should get a prism. So we need a Stygian iron plate, a prism, and a mob shard. So a mob shard is made with a shard die, a yaw hammer, and an ender pearl, which we can totally do. Let's make a couple. Okay, so now I have 3 mob shards. Let's go pick 3 mobs to kill in order to use them in the factory. And it's not even nighttime. Okay, so I'm going to wait around here with my little foxy friend for nighttime to roll around, and we will go out and capture some mobs. The sun has finally set. Let's head out and find some simple mobs to kill and gather their essence, because the level 1 mob farm will only work on simple mobs. So I think we'll start with things like zombies. Hey, buddy. Okay, so we have 1 of 5 kills. We have to attack the mob with a shard and then kill it to fill it. Okay, so I think we just target the mob like so. Boom. And then we can kill it and it goes in. Yes, that's 2. So you will be 3, 4. There are millions of zombies when you don't need them, and now I can't find a stinking zombie. Hello? You're over here with a bunch of people I don't like. You. Ow. And we have fully programmed. Let's try a passive mob. So, pig. I do like the target. Okay, pig fully programmed. Now let's try skeleton. You, I don't like y'all. Go away. Oh, there's coming out of the woodwork. Come here. You are not part of this plan, creeper. Zombie? Where's your friend? Aha! And that is a fully programmed skeleton. Okay, that was a successful hunt. We now have a mob shard that is fully programmed to a skeleton, a mob shard fully programmed to zombie, and a mob shard fully programmed to a pig. I think we'll start with the zombie. So that is what we will make our controller out of. So we need our prism and a Stygian iron plate and the zombie charged mob shard. So I believe we will set this on the anvil, add the prism, and add the Stygian iron plate. Grab our yaw hammer, give it a whack. And now we have a mob controller. That's very cool. So we'll add that to the collection of blocks we need. I think we need one more block. If we look at the requirements for the Zealoter, we need a mob controller and a 1 perk level 1 plus 1 perk slot. So we made the perk slot. Now let's take a look at the level 1 perks. Scale the summit. Generate essence to upgrade the factory. Oh, this might be what we want. 5% drop chance and a Zealoter to upgrade the well, we definitely want to do that, I think. Okay, so that requires a golden carrot, a nether wart, and a neophyte plate. Neophyte plate? Oh, that's easy. It's iron and a Stygian iron plate. Uh-oh, with liquid enchant and an injection press. How do we get liquid enchant? We do it by putting enchanted books in an enchant liquefier. Okay, well, let's make one of those. Seems pretty easy. We just need a piston, a bucket, some books, and a machine casing. 1 enchant liquefier. I knew all of the crazy enchanted books I've been saving over in my disenchanted area would come in handy at some point. Let's go grab a few. Disenchant all the books. I think we have a ton over here. Also, there's another surprise back here. Sneak peek. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? Oh, there might be some villager buddies in here for us. That's another episode, though. Okay, enchanted books we don't need. Soulbound, 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 soulbound. Okay, I got a handful of books. We'll just set them down in a chest for now to clear our inventory. Let's set down our enchant liquefier. Give it a connector so we can add it to the XNet system, primarily to give it power. So there it is. Insert. Now it should have power, which is fabulous. And I believe we just feed it some enchanted books. There it goes. Yeah, what a great use. So we get a half a bucket per book, or I guess, oh, it depends on the book, maybe? Well, that one seems to take a while. Piercing 4, how much does that give us? Oh, a lot. Okay, that's great. So depending on the enchant, so it looks like for every enchantment level, you get a half a bucket. Okay, so now we have a liquid enchantment, which we would need to put in an injection press. So let's make another one of those. 1 injection press. This one's going to need the liquid enchant in it. So let's create yet another fluid channel to pull liquid enchant out of the enchant liquefier and into that injection press we just added. Yes, that also needs power. So we'll add it to the power channel. Now it's getting power. Yay. Okay, so now to make our neophyte plate, we need a Stygian iron plate and a piece of iron in the injection press. A Stygian iron plate and a piece of iron in the injection press. Maybe. Oh, it's very slow. That's okay. We're patient. While that's crafting, I'll grab some nether wart and a golden carrot. Which I think we have some. Yes, we do. Nice. Neophyte plate. Now we can make this perk. Scale the summit perk. Ta-da! Yeah. Okay, so that'll go in that perk block. And we'll go ahead and grab our intern so we can assemble this and then grab all the blocks that we need. Okay, now that we have all the blocks we need, we're going to place the heart underneath the layout guide and be sure that you are facing in the direction that the heart only has that little X on the front side. Make sure you're facing that direction so that when you set it down, it's facing outwards as well. And we're going to right click on the heart. And then it'll tell us we need to put a primary controller at, this block doesn't put down automatically, the mob controllers. You have to set it down yourself. And then we right click. Now it says an expected cell down here on the ground. It wants us to put the Cantatus cell down. And now if we right click, it says found valid Zellator factory. So the factory has been made. So now we can break the layout guide, and we can always put the layout guide on the top again if we need it. And that is our valid Woot factory. Okay, I believe the only thing we need to do is put Cantatus Fluid into this cell on the bottom of the factory. And we're going to do this with XNet. So I'm just going to hook this up to our XNet network. And hopefully we can see that Cantatus cell. That's perfect. So our Cantatus Fluid is in this fluid vat. So we want to make sure we identify that one. Yes, it's the flashy red one, which is the second one on our list. So we want to make a new fluid channel. Okay, so we'll need to extract from the south side of our fluid vat, extract and insert into the Cantatus block. And hopefully, yes, Cantatus is being used. And if we want to get loot out, yes. Okay, so I just stuck a chest on there. We could probably use an Ender storage system, Ender chest, to connect this to the mob farm inventory. But for now, the Woot factory is running and producing drops from zombies. After a little bit of fiddling around, we have a working Woot factory. I'm very excited about this. I can't wait to see what we can do with the higher tiers of this. And I think with that, that's everything we have time for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like. It helps me out and I appreciate it. If you'd like to keep up with what's going on the channel, don't hesitate to subscribe. And remember, as always, you are the shiny stuff that awesome is made of. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.